Today I'm bringing you the best dinosaur deck profile for March 2023 in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's jump into it. What's up, Ocean? You got Matt here, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. I want to thank you guys for the amazing support you've shown on the channel so far. The first two videos we put out have been absolute bangers, so thank you guys so much for that. Today, though, I am bringing you an amazing video. It is the best dinosaur deck profile for the March 2023 format. This is specifically a going second list with a twist for going first. So if you guys are excited for it, then make sure to leave a like on the video. If this video hits 30 likes, I will bring you a combo guide for this deck to show you all the combos that you can make with this strategy. So if you guys are excited, make sure to smash the like button and let's go ahead and jump on into it. So welcome back to the deck profile portion of the video. If you guys want to see a combo guide for this deck, then of course make sure to leave a like on the video. We're aiming for 30 likes on the content. If we hit that, then I will bring you a list of combos, a combo video tutorial for this deck. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Starting off with 3 copies of Soul Eating Oviraptor. This is the best card in the deck as your normal summon. This card offers so much for the strategy. It is an incredible card to have access as your Rhoda. It also gives you a way to dump cards to the graveyard. It is a card that allows you to special summon. It's just does so much for the strategy. Definitely one of the best cards out there. Thank God this card exists, one of my favorite cards of all time. Then we have the 1 copy of Miscellaneous Source. This card is one of our extenders and one of the best ways we have to search off of the cards we have to search off of our Oviraptor, I should say. This card allows us to extend by banishing it from the graveyard along with any other number of dinos. We can then special summon from the deck a dino at the same level as the card, as the number of cards we banished from our graveyard. On top of that, if you discard it from your hand, it offers you protection, or your Dinos protection rather, in the main phase from activated effects. So really valuable to dodge hand traps and stuff like that. It's really, really strong. We then have the 1 copy of the Giant Rex. This card is really good, allowing us to be able to have a recursive body to special summon itself over and over and over, once per turn really, if it gets banished. That's really good because this deck does a lot of banishing. You're able to banish cards off of the UCT effect to summon, the double evolution pill, Miscellaneous Source even as well. There's a lot of effects that banish, so having a recursive body like Giant Rex is really nice. We then have 3 copies of the Baby Ceresaurus. That's the one, Baby Ceresaurus, the first baby. This one here is really good. It is the better of the 2 in my mind. It allows you to have a way to summon from the deck a level 4 or lower dinosaur monster, which is really, really good. Not once per turn, no restriction on that. Their effects are not negated or anything. Just a super solid card when it gets destroyed and sent to the graveyard by card effect. Amazing card to have for the deck, and the reason why the deck is kind of centered around destroying cards. We then have the other baby, 2 copies of Petit Pteranodon. This card is also a must in the deck. It depends on what kind of build you play. If you want to play a very heavy build for like the True King strategy, then you want to go with 2 or 3 of this. If you want to play a very light count for the True King strategy, then you play 1 or 2, depending on how much destroying you want to be doing. I like the ratio for 2. More than that, it seems kind of bricky to me in either option, so I'm going to stick with 2 in my build. We then have 2 copies of the Animadorned Argosaur. This card is really strong as well. It gives you a way to break opponent boards because it gets you a search for the double evolution pill, which in turn gets you to UCT, which can break the boards. And on top of that, it can pop a baby and then trigger its effect as well, because it can destroy dinosaur monsters in your hand or field to be able to pop its effect to be able to search for the double evolution pill. So really solid here as well. We then have our main boss monsters. We have 2 copies of the Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. This card is the main boss monster for the deck. Absolutely incredible card. This card is so strong, allowing you to be able to essentially special summon itself out by banishing 2 of the dinosaur monsters in your graveyard, but you also get the chance to destroy a dinosaur or monster rather in your hand or field to Book of Moon the entire board. Really strong, and on top of that, it can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each, and on top of that, if it attacks a monster that's in defense or face down defense position, you can use its effect to send that card to the graveyard and inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. Just an amazingly strong card on a 3,500 body. It can really end games pretty damn quickly. Amazing card. We then have the 1 copy of Dino Wrestler Pankratops. I'm not mad at having this card in the deck. There's other options that you could run. I like this one here because it gives us a way to break through boards pretty effectively. It's not the best card in the current format, but it definitely has its uses to be able to muscle past some problematic floodgates because it's a quick effect to attribute this card basically and pop that card on the field. So it definitely has a lot of advantages with that. I think it just makes sense to have on the field to deal with like some problematic boards that like Sprite might have and whatever. So it definitely has its merits. Next up is going to be an engine that I'm not the biggest fan of. It's going to be 3 copies of, well, 2 copies rather, of Scrap Raptor and the 1 Scrap Chimera. I'm not the biggest fan of this engine here, but it definitely makes sense to have access to because it is a strong engine to extend. It's also a tuner, which is nice for synchro access for specifically synchro 8s. And having access to a way to pop cards on the field is still really nice. I just find that it's kind of conflicted a bit with Overraptor. You almost always want to be summoning the Overraptor and not the Scrap Raptor. So whichever Raptor you go with, I mean, Overraptor's better, period, point blank. So just keep that in mind. Next up is going to be our hand trap lineup. So we have our 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, which is going to be absolutely incredible in this format to dodge cards like the Branded Fusion, which is nice. It stops cards like Gigantic Sprites or cards like Sprite Starter. It shuts down cards like Traptrix Sarah in a way. It has a lot of good value, so I'm pretty excited to see how the format evolves and see if we can have Ash Blossom become even better than it already is. It also shuts down cards like Kashtira Unicorn, searching for the birth, which is also really powerful. We then have mandatory 3 copies of Nibiru, the Primal Being. This is a going second base deck, so you kind of have to run 3 copies of the Nib. Nib is so good in this format because you're able to shut down the board of Kashtira that decides to try and break through and lock your entire zones. If that happens, they're going to summon way more than 5 times, so you have Nib to shut that shit down. On top of that, if they decide to go for a board that is very resilient to Nibiru, something like the Arise Heart build that is just going 3 material Arise Heart and that's it, so it's 4 summons only, then you can't really Nibiru that. But we play cards to be able to get around that, including our 3 Kaijus. We have our Godarla, our Gameciel, and the 1 Dogoron. So Dogoron is here because it is searchable. It is also the biggest. On top of that, we have Gameciel because it is the smallest, and we have the Godarla because it is a level 8, and it is a medium-sized one. So honestly, the reason why we're playing these 3 specifically is because they're not level 7s. Level 8 Kaijus are really important to have because if you give your opponent level 7 and you can't out the Kaiju, then they can just use it to go into an Arise Heart or whatever, and it's just a problematic card from there. So we don't want to give them rank 7s for free, and that's why we decided to go with our suite that we have right here. Next up, we have our 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. This is really good against the build that is, again, going for that single Kashtira Arise Heart, just as the Kaijus are. So I think that this setup is really strong here. I like Infinite Impermanence a lot in this meta. It just helps out with so many different cards here, including cards like the Gigantic Sprite. Helps out with cards like the Traptrix monsters that are not the ones from the extra deck. No, don't go ahead and imperm a Traptrix Sarah or a Traptrix Pudica or whatever, not Pudica, the other one, a Pingulica, whichever that one is, the new one. Don't try and imperm those things, but definitely try and imperm something like a Pudica so it can't banish you, or search for the field spell, or a Mantis, or whatever the case might be. But yeah, there's a couple options to have. Imperm is the most flexible hand trap there is, and it doesn't lose to something like a Call by the Grave. So yeah, having Imperm is still really strong. Next up though is going to be our spells for consistency. We have our 3 copies of Fossil Dig, super strong to have in the format. A way to get you your level 6 or lower dinos is incredibly important. Definitely one of the better options available. Love this card here. The fact that it's not a once per turn, it's a rota card. I'll have on the top right up there, that in this area here, there'll be a card so you guys can see the actual video I made on the top 10 rotas in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's go ahead and take a look at that as well. Leave a like on that one too while you're there. Next up is going to be 3 copies of the field spell of the deck, Lost World. Love Lost World, such an amazing field spell, has 4 really good effects. Basically, it'll make so that all monsters in the field other than dinos lose 500 attack and defense. On top of that, if a dino is normal or special summon, you can give your opponent a token, which counts as a dinosaur, but is also a normal monster. While your opponent has a token, they cannot target monsters in the field with card effects other than the token. And on top of that, if a token or a normal monster, specifically rather, will be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy a dinosaur in deck instead. So it kind of gets your plays going from like start to finish and gives you protection as well. It's if you have a token up on your side of the field, on your opponent's side of the field rather, they can't imperm a card you have. They're stuck, which is great. Really solid there. I love this card here. And on top of that, we have the terraforming to search it. I think it's really strong to have this. Even though we're playing 42 cards, you still want to play the terraforming. We then have 2 copies of Double Evolution Pill. You want to have 2 of them. One to search off the Anadorn Archosaur rather. The other one to have just in case. If you don't have any targets in deck for Archosaur, then that kind of hurts you. You want to make sure you have a target in deck for the Double Evolution Pill. Such an amazing card. We then have the 2 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber and the 1 copy of Called by the Grave as our 42nd card. I could have had 3 copies of Kaiju Slumber. I just felt like it wasn't as good because I didn't want to increase the deck size to 43. Having 42 is plenty, and you kind of need to play the Call by the Grave so you can dodge specific hand traps like Ash Blossom or Baylor or whatever the case might be. So just keep that in mind. As I just smacked my arm here, I apologize for that. But as I was saying, you really want to have a limited number of cards, and I felt like having 42 was a good number without going overboard while keeping what we wanted in the deck and still being relatively consistent. So yeah, that is going to be the main deck here. We have quite a bit of solid cards here, and then we can go ahead and move on to our extra deck and of course our side deck. So starting off with the extra deck, we're going to look at our Link ones because those are, well, in order. So starting off, the mandatory Link ones we have to play are going to be Link Karibo and the Secure Gardna. You have to play these cards here in my opinion. Reason being is Link Karibo lets you get out of your Amazon Archosaur into a Link Karibo, and then Secure Gardna lets you get out of your Link Karibo into itself. That puts a Cyberse monster and a Dinosaur monster, better yet, a Dino and a non-Dino, in grave, so you can use your double evolution pill to be able to banish them both to summon out the UCT from the deck. Really important here. Moving on though is going to be our Link 2s. We play 4 of them, so starting off with the ones that are mandatory, we have the Wyvern, which is massive. So important to have in the deck because you need to have a way to take advantage of the scrap engine. If you don't play the scrap engine, you don't play it. It is a bit of a choke point of the deck because it is a dragon and not a dinosaur, so it is weak to cards like Imperm, like Valor, like Ash, because the miscellaneous source won't protect it, but it still is a solid card to have. I think Pentastag is a must play in this deck because if you have this card in your, let's say, left EMZ and your opponent, and you have your UCT just below it, because this card is pointing to it, you'll give that UCT piercing damage, and then you can just, well, win the game from there. Just an amazing card to have access to, such a strong card to have in a format like this where you can Book of Moon an entire board. We then have cards that are less mandatory, but I think still very good in the deck, starting off with the IP Masquerena and then the Pit Knight Early. So Pit Knight Early is a weird inclusion. Not many people are playing this card in their Dino decks, but I think it's really strong because you have ways to recur this card over and over. If it's destroyed by card effect, you can special summon it back to your side of the field over and over. So you basically would go have this card point towards something like the Masquerena. If you can do that, then you use Masquerena's effect to be able to tag out. You chain Pit Knight Early to negate a card in the field, then you use the Masquerena and something like a Wyvern to go into another card, or you can use the Early to, when it's pointing towards your UCT, you can use the UCT effect to pop a card in the field and then Book of Moon your opponent's entire board. You chain the Early, so before you do the destruction, you do the negate the Early provides, then you destroy the Early, and because it's destroyed by card effect, you bring it back to your side of the field, and then you're good to go. You can do it over and over and over. So it's a consistent negate, which I like a lot. Next up though is going to be the one Nightmare Unicorn, which pairs really well with the IP Masquerena. Kind of have to play this, self-explanatory. The bounce, the spin, whatever you want to call it, is really, really strong in this format here to be able to get rid of problematic threats that can't be destroyed or sent to the graveyard even. Then we have our Link 4s. We have our Appaloosa Bow the Goddess. We have our Borrelsword Dragon. Yeah, Borrelsword Dragon, because I can't afford a Axis Go Talker. And then we have a Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax. Now, I love Appaloosa for certain end boards. It's not good for everything, but when you know what your opponent's playing in their deck, it's good to have access to if they're playing a monster-focused strategy. Borrelsword Dragon, again, it would be Axis Code if I could afford it, but it will get the job done for now. So make sure to use that if you have it. But again, Borrelsword Dragon definitely is enough. And then we have the Avermax here because it allows us to be able to get to basically anything we need to in terms of a way to deal with problematic threats on the field. This can cover basically anything, especially if you use it to summon off of something like an IP plus like a Scrap Wyvern. You're really, really strong from there. I can show you guys a combo on how to get there if you guys get to 30 likes in the video, and we can go ahead and post the combo tutorial. So that's it for the Link monsters. Really strong suite here. We have 10 Link monsters followed by our 4 XYZs. We have our Dolka, we have our Lagia, we have the Dugares, and we have the Baguska. These 4 cards here, in my opinion, are mandatory. You have to play these 4 cards here for your XCs. You have to play the Dolka because it's your Walking Solemn Strike. You have to play the Lagia because your Walking Solemn Judgment. You have your Dugares because it does 3 really good effects. The first would be to draw 2, discard 1, skip your next draw phase. The next one would be to revive a level 4 lower monster from the graveyard, and then skip your main phase. And the most important one would be to double the attack of a monster you control, and then skip your next battle phase. So that's even better because you can OTK out of nowhere. Imagine a 7,000 attack UCT with a Pentastack pointing to it, booking and mooning your opponent's entire board. It is insanely strong and definitely worthy of OTKing your opponent. And then Baguska, of course, just plan B in case you really need to. Honestly, you don't need to do it too often, but it's a good backup plan to have. So that's going to be our XYZs. Moving on to the 1 Synchro, Borrelsword Savage Dragon. You have to play this card here because you're playing the access to the Scrap Raptor, which is a tuner. If it wasn't a tuner, then you would not be playing this. If you don't play the Scrap Engine, you don't need to play it. But yeah, that is going to be it, guys. That is the extra deck and the main deck to this deck here, this Dino set, this going second Dino deck. But what happens if your opponent is saying, hey, you should probably go first here, because if you're in the die roll and you say, I'm going second, your opponent might want you to go first, since that you may not have the best options for. They're going to try and interrupt you. That's when you bring out the big guns. You side in your Dragonic Diagram, your Lethal Sagem, and your Set Rotation. Now, I'll be honest, it'd be nice to play multiple copies of Lethal Sagem. You don't really need to. The deck is tight on space. You don't want to take up too much of your extra deck, or your side deck rather, for Lethal Sagems. So just play this. You can search diagram through the field spell, through the terraforming rather, or through the set rotation. So you have 3 copies in the deck. Little Sagem, it's good to have. If you get it, it's great. If you don't get it, it's not the end of the world. It can still pop off a good bit because you have a lot of Earths in your deck. The Scrap Raptors are an Earth, the Giant Rex are an Earth, all the babies are Earths. You have options here. So definitely consider the Little Sagem. Even if you don't draw it, it's still a solid card to pick up, and definitely lets you take advantage, because if you pop 2 babies to get to it, then oh my god. Even going diagram plus a Babysitter Source in your hand is like an insane combo that ends on like 4 interruptions plus a Book of Moon on your opponent's turn as well, which is super solid. Moving on, though, we have 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier. This card is also really strong in the format, stopping the Synchros from Sword Soul, stopping the XYZs from Kashtira, stopping the Fusions from Branded. Only deck it really doesn't touch too much is Sprite, but I guess you can stop it from going to like the Gigantic Sprite. So yeah, it's just a solid card all around. Then we have 2 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance as a way to stop the spell cards in the format, like Dark Ruler No More, for example, which kind of shut down a lot of what your deck does. So keep that in mind. This card does have its value. We then have going second cards, again, 3 copies of Evenly Matched. Honestly, if you want to side out something like the Scrap Raptor, you could. If you don't like the, if let's say you don't like the Ash Blossoms in your matchup or the Nibiru's, you can go with Evenly Matched. Or if you're doing something like a matchup against like Labyrinth or whatever, or Traptrix, this is also a really good card because it affects the player and not the actual cards themselves. So the monsters like Traptrix Sarah would still be affected by it. Then finally, we have 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone and the 1 Harpy's Feather Duster. So these are the cards we have here to deal with back row. We have 7 cards in here to deal with back row, the Evenly Matched, and then the Cosmics and the Harpy's Feather Duster. The reason why we have Cosmic Cyclone here is because I think that's better than Twin Twister for this deck specifically, considering that you're not losing any card economy. Same thing, it's still going to be a 1-for-1 trade, but it's not, you don't have to discard a card. And a lot of the time you don't want to discard cards with this deck. You want to make sure that you have access to your resources. This is not the most graveyard reliant deck. If it was, then you would definitely play Twin Twister. But because most of your cards, other than like Misk or like in very certain situations, Giant Rex, do nothing in the graveyard, it's good to have the Cosmic Cyclone over the Twin Twister. So yeah, that is going to be the end of this deck profile. If you guys enjoyed the video, then do me a favor and leave a like on the video. Let me know which ratios, what your thoughts are on the deck profile itself. I'm a big fan of this strategy. It's one of my favorite decks. It's the deck that got me back into playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And honestly, UCT is absolutely insane. One of my favorite cards of all time. Definitely up there with the, where is it? I have to find the actual copy that I have of it in the deck. There we go, my Soul Eating Oviraptor. I love these 2 cards here. They're absolutely incredible, and they were the backbone to majority of my competitive success when I was getting back into the game. So yeah, if you guys are excited for a potential combo video, then leave a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. We're on the road to 50 subs. And of course, comment your thoughts on the deck profile down below. Any feedback is super, super appreciated. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.